Today's daf is Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Nun and Daf 50. We're just going to do the Mishnah Daf Mentes Amid Beis and then get right into the Gemara on the bottom of the page, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So the Mishnah, we finished Nikmar Hadin. It was a big perek with a lot of agadata yesterday regarding David HaMelech and Avner, etc., etc. Now we get back to the business of the Misas Bezdin. So that's why the Mishnah says, Arba Misas Nimsru Bezdin. There are four types of death penalties that are given over to the Bezdin. In other words, the Bezdin has a right to impose four different types of death penalties for people who do Averis. Skila, the stoning. Now, the order is very important over here. That means when I'm mentioning the worst Averas are getting Skila. Sreifa, then comes the next worst Avera, is Sreifa, which is burning. We'll learn more how that was done. They put hot lead down somebody's mouth. Skila, we saw in the end of the parak, that you throw somebody off of a two-story building and then they stone him. Sreifa, that's the second. Hereg is the knife, where it's another, in the Gemara it's called Sayif, which means they chop his head off. And chenek is they strangle somebody with, and we'll see how all this was done in the future Mishnayos. But the important point is that the most severest of all the Mises Bezin, Skila, then comes Sreifa, then comes Hereg, which is Sayif, and chenek, and choking. Now, what's the difference? Death is death. What do I need to know which is the most severest, right? What do I care? The answer is it's very important, because suppose somebody did two Averis, and he got the death penalty for two different sins. Let's say he was mizana, he did znus with an ashes ish, so he's supposed to get chenek, and he also like violated Shabbos, so he gets skila. So now he has two death sentences on him. Which one would you give him, skila or chenek? So you give him the more severe one, skila. So it's important to know which is more severe. So that's why the order is skila, sreifa, herek, chenek. Rab Shimon says Sreifa, Skila. So Rab Shimon switches the order. Sreifa is the most worst, and then you get Skila. Chenek, then comes the knife, then comes Hereg. The Chenek is the strangling, and the Hereg, and then the knife. So he flips around the first two and the last two. He puts Sreifa before Skila, and he puts Chenek before Hereg. Zumitzus and Iskon. So Rab Shimon has a different understanding of what is more severe. So that's the Mishnah. So the Mishnah, the first part of the Gemara dealt with yesterday. I mean, the first part of this daf dealt with, and we go to the bottom of the page. Basically, that the Mishnah is telling you an order, and it's important to know the order. That's all that this. In some Mishnayos, they tell you something, the order is not important, or the order doesn't matter. Here, this Mishnah is not just a list, it's telling you what is more severe than the other. So now we have to examine the Mishnah. And the way the Gemara is going to go is like this. First, the Gemara is going to show that Skila is more difficult than Sreifa, then Hereg, and then Cherek. Then Sreifa is going to be more difficult than Hereg and Chenek. And then Hereg is more difficult than Chenek. That's the way the Gemara goes. It has to establish the reasons for all of this. So the Mishnah, the Gemara begins 3 lines from the bottom of the page, Mentes. Skila chamura misreifa. Skila is more severe than the burning. Why? Because what do you think is the biggest avera you can do in the Torah? The biggest avera is nitna l'magadif. Someone chas v'shalom curses God. If you serve avodah zarah, you get skila. Umay chumra. What makes that more severe avera? Shekem paisha yoda beikar, because you're actually sticking out your hand against the main thing, which is God, and therefore, so to speak, you're fighting with God. That's the worst avera. So you get skila. If the Torah tells you get skila, so it must be the skila is the worst avera, and the skila is the most hardest punishment. So the Gemara says, Adarabba, I would say just the opposite. Sreifa chamura, the burning is more severe. Shekain, nitla lebas koyin shenzinsa. Here's what we're going to come up with this a lot today. A daughter of a koyin who is married, right, and she does nus, the Torah tells you that for sure everybody agrees that she gets sreifa. Normally, an ashes ish, a woman who's an adulteress, she's married and she does nus, she gets chenek. But a bas kohen, a daughter of a kohen, so since she's doing some shame to her family, and she's a kohen, she has a higher neshama. If she does nus, the Torah tells you she gets reifa. Now, what the Gemara is going to say is that a bas kohen shezinsa does two averis. Really, she's first violating a avera against God by doing znus, but also, in addition, she's shaming the entire family. She's a married bas kohen, and she does nus. So therefore, she did a double avera, and the Torah gave her the severe punishment of sreifa. So sreifa must be much more chomer than skila. My chumra, what makes a bas kohen a bad avera? She's destroying and shaming her father. So it's ra l'shamayim and ra l'brias. So we go now to Daf Nun Amid Aleph. So the Gemara says, not true, because now when you compare a nesua that does nus, a married woman that does nus is less of an avera or less of an avera than somebody who is an arusa, an engaged girl that does an anara marasa, who's like 12 years old, she's engaged, and didn't go to chuppah yet. If she does znus, it's a worse type of znus, because a married woman, it's not such a begam. She already was living with her husband, and if she did znus, it's not as a big avera or a bigger hurt than if someone who never lived with her husband, she's just an arusa, and she's a young girl, if she does nus, it's a bigger avera. And yet, the Torah tells you by an arusa that does nus, she gets skila. So, as opposed to an asua. So, kasavri rabbanim, the rabbis hold that nesua yaitza l'sreifa v'loi arusa. A nesua, an adulteress, a bas kohen nesua gets reifa. But if she's a bas kohen arusa, she would not get reifa. Mida apke rachman l'arusa beskila, since the Torah tells you an arusa bas kohen, who is, and this is not just an arusa bas kohen, but even a arusa bas ro, but we're talking about a bas kohen. If she did a bigger vera and she's a bas kohen, she gets skila, then so we see skila chamura. Skila is more severe than sreifa, because a nesua bas kohen who does nus gets sreifa, but an arusa bas kohen, an engaged girl who's a bas kohen, she gets skila. So it must be that skila is more severe than sreifa. So Gemara established step one: skila is more severe than sreifa. Now, skila is more severe than sayif, which is the third one. Skila chamura misayif. Why? How do you know? That's given over to someone who is cursed as Hashem and does avodah zara. So the worst avera gets skila, like we said before. So it must be skila is more severe than the knife. Adarabba, says the Gemara, sayif chomer, sayif is more severe. Why? Because shekei nitin la'anshe ir hanidachas. If a whole entire city does avodah zara, you don't give them skila. The Torah says you knife them. They get sayif, and not only that, as opposed to a person that does avodah zara, if after they kill him with skila, his yorshim can benefit from his possessions. But a whole city that does avodah zara, you kill them with the knife, and then you have to destroy their money. You have to burn the whole city down. So we see that sayif might be more severe than skila. So the Gemara says, Amrit, I will tell you another thing. You're right. I'm going to prove it to you that skila is more severe than sayif. Let's take a look as a ir hanidachas. The whole city that does avodah zara gets sayif. Okay, I grant you that. But let's say the guy who was on the megaphone in the ir hanidachas, and he was inciting people. Not only was he doing avodah zara, but he was inciting the whole city to do avodah zara. So he's like the drug dealer. So he is worse than the person who was subverted. He is inciting the people to do avodah zara. And the Torah tells you that the madiach, the inciter, as opposed to the city itself, he's going to get skila. So it must be that skila is more chomer than sayif. Amr, Eza Koyach Meruba, what's more severe? Koyach Madiach or Koyach Nidich? The one that's the insider or the incited? He does a worse avera. He's inciting other people. The tiny we learned in a brisa, the one that incites a whole city to do avodah zarah, he gets skila. So skila must be worse than sayif. Now we go. Skila is worse than the chenek. So what's skila worse than chenek, which is number 4? Shekain. Skila is the worst avera because you give it to the worst type of sin, someone who curses God. So the Gemara says, Adarabba, just the opposite. Chenek chomer. The 4th one, chenek, the strangling, must be maybe severer than skila. Why? So what makes chenek chomer? Because shekain, or what the Gemara doesn't mean chomer, but what it can mean is that it should be equal to skila. Yes, you find that skila is given to the worst avera, but chenek is also given to the worst avera. What is another worst avera a person could do? Shekain niten lemake aviv v'imoy. If someone slaps his father and mother, or mother, and causes a bruise, right? So he gets the misa of chenek, the choking death. So, and what makes it worse than cursing God? Because Hashem said that the respect that you're supposed to have for your parents is like the respect you're supposed to have for God. So, so if they're equal in respect, you're supposed to respect your parents like God, and you get chenek for disrespecting and slapping your parents and causing a bruise. So chenek must be at least equal to skila. So how do you know skila is more severe than chenek? And says the Gemara, yes, because we're going to find that the Torah found that an asua, a married woman that does nus, she gets chenek. Oh, a rusa, a murusa, an unmarried, she didn't go to chuppah yet. A girl that does znus, she gets skila. So it must be, the Torah wants to give the worst punishment to the arusa. And the Torah took it out from chenek and said, an arusa is going to get skila. So it must be the skila is more chamer. Mida'apke rachmon al arusa bas Yisrael, miklal nesura bas Yisrael, mechenek l'skila, shmamina skila chamura. So we find over here that skila is the most severe. So if we go back to the Mishnah, over here, the Gemara established that skila is more worse than sreifa, chereg, and chenek. Now the Gemara is going to, in the next Gemara is going to say sreifa is more severe than hereg and more severe than chenek, and then the Gemara is going to say hereg is more severe than chenek. So let's go back to the Gemara and see how it works out. So now the Gemara goes back to sreifa chamura misayib. Sreifa is more severe than the knife. How do you know sreifa is more severe than the knife? A bas kohen that does nus gets sreifa. So Gemara says, Adarabba, Saif is severe because it's given Shkenitin Lanshir and Adacha, so my Chumash came a moin and Ovad. And it's given to a city that does avodah zarah. So it must be that Saif is more Chomer. So Saif is more Chomer, and because it's given to an Irani Dachas, that's the whole city that does avodah zarah, and you're going to burn the whole city down. A bas kohen that does nus, okay, you're going to give her sreifa, but you're not going to say all her possessions should be burned along with her. So it must be that sayif is worse because sayif, the knife, is given to the city. Answers the Gemara, okay, fine. I'm going to tell you another reason, a non-logical reason, but we're going to say nemar avia b'skila. It says the word aviha by skila. It says the word aviha. There's a pasuk that says the word father when it comes to skila. The nema avia b'sreifa, right? It says the word avia by the nara hamarasa that does nus, and it says the word avia when the bas kohen does nus. Ma avia more b'skila, just like the avia that's said by skila. Once what we know about skila already is skila chamura b'sayif. Skila is more severe than sayif. Af avia more b'sreifa, sreifa chamura b'sayif. So that teaches you that the sreifa, that's also the father that says by sreifa, the word avia teaches you that sreifa is more severe than sayif. That skila is more severe than the knife, then also the burning is more severe than the knife. Period. End the story. So now it's not a logical Torah thing, but it's a gzeira shava. Now the Gemara has to have a couple more things, and then we finish explaining the Rabbanim. Sreifa chamura mechenek. How do you know sreifa is more severe than chenek? Shekei nitnu lebas kohen shezinsa. Okay, sreifa is the worst avera because it's given to it's the worst punishment because it's given to a bas kohen. My chumra keda'amin. The chumra of bas kohen is because she's shaming her father. Adarabba chenek chamor shekei nitnu lemaka ovavimoy my chumra shekin hukash kvoidum kvoida bakam. Maybe chenek. Chenek is also given to a bad avera if someone hits his father and mother. So how do you know sreifa is more severe than chenek? And says the Gemara, the nesua of a bas Yisrael, a married bas Yisrael that does nus, as we said but many times, gets chenek. A married bas koyin that does nus gets reifa. And the Torah wants to make it more harder than on a bas koyin. And the Torah says you're not going to get chenek, you're going to get reifa. So mechenek l'sreifa. So now we know sreifa is more severe than chenek. So now we have to do the last one. How do you know sayef, the knife, is number 3, is more severe than number 4? How do you know sayef is more severe than chenek? Shekei nitel ansheir dedachas. My chumash kei b'moyin amad. You give sayef, the knife, to the ansheir and dedachas, and therefore sayef must be a harder punishment. Says the Gemara, Adarabba, I'll say the opposite. Chenekoma, the choking. Maybe chenek is just as severe as sayif, because it's also given to a bad avera. So you have sayif, which is given to an iran nidachas, and you have the chenek, which is also given to a maka of avivimoy, both a bad averas. So what makes sayif more severe than chenek? The answer is the Gemara answers that you're right, but the fact that the Torah, even though one who slaps his father and mother did a big avera, but if you curse God, if you do avodah zarah, that's even a worse avera because that's dealing with God directly. So therefore, if the Torah gave sayef to ir nidachas and chenek to a just for maka avivimai, it must be that sayef is more chomer than chenek. So therefore, we established all the seder according to the Tanna Kama. Let's go back into the Mishnah. Mishnah says there are 4 Mises Bezdin. The first is Skila, then comes Sreifa, Herek, V'chenek, and we establish why each one is more severe than the next. Now we're going to do the same for Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon says, what's the most severest Avera? Sreifa. Then comes Skila, then comes Chenek, and then comes Herek. So he says the easiest one is the knife. But the others are Sreifa, Skila, Chenek, and Herek. So let's go into Rabbi Shimon. Back into the Gemara. Rab Shimon says, and then we're going to go a little faster because now you basically have it. Remember, the key difference between Rab Shimon is going to say, the Rab Shimon is going to say that an Arusa Bas Koyin gets Sreifa. Arusa Bas Yisrael that does nus gets Skila. He's going to say Arusa Bas Koyin, when the Torah wants to make it more severe, gives her also Sreifa. And therefore, because of that made Rab Shimon's opinion of that Sreifa is more severe than Skila. So let's read it inside. Sreifa chamur meskila. Sreifa is more severe than Skila. Shkein nitnel bas koyin shezinsa. That's given to a bas koyin. Umay chomer shkein mechalela severe. So the Gemara says, Adarabba, Skila chamura shkein nitnel megadef v'oivek chaven umay chomer shkein poish yoda beikar. Skila must be the worst because if you curse God, you get that Skila. So Rab Shimon says, the Omar, he says, now here's the real reason why Sreifa is more severe. The Torah chose to give the worst type of punishment to a Bas Koyin. Whether you're a Bas Koyin Nesua or a Bas Koyin Arusa, you're getting the worst. If you do Znus, you're getting the worst type of Misa. And a Bas Yisrael, a Jewish girl that does Nus, she gets Skila. Bas Koyin Arusa Bas Koyin will now get Sreifa. So it must be that Sreifa is more severe than Skila. Rab Shimon the Tamei, Achas Rusa B'Achan Nesua Yatzal Sreifa. That a Bas Koyin who's an Arusa or a Nesua, she gets Sreifa. Mid Apke Rachmon al Arusa Bas Koyin, Miklal Arusa Bas Yisrael. The Torah told you that a Bas Koyin, Arusa Bas Koyin, is different than Arusa Bas Yisrael. That just because an Arusa Bas Yisrael gets Skila, but an Arusa Bas Koyin is going to get Sreifa. She's a Bas Koyin that does an Avera. Shema Mina, from here, Rab Shimon derives Sreifa is the most chomer. Sreifa, now you know Sreifa is the worst. Sreifa chamur mechenek. How do you know Sreifa is worse than chenek? You know, Sreifa is more severe than Skila. But how do you know Sreifa is more severe than choking? Because it's given to a bas kohen. And says the Gemara again. Mid the apke rachmona, the Gemara says that I know Sreifa is more severe than Chenek because a Nisua, a regular married woman that does Nus, gets Chenek. A Bas Kohen that does Nus gets Sreifa. So it must be the Sreifa, Sreifa must be more severe than Chenek. Since the Torah says a Bas Kohen that's married is different than a Bas Yisrael that does Nus, a married Bas Yisrael that does Nus. Married Bas Yisrael that does Nus gets Chenek, but a married Bas Kohen gets Sreifa. Shma Mina, Sreifa Chamur. From here we see that Sreifa is more severe. Sreifa Chamur Mesayev. How do you know Sreifa is more severe than the knife? Shekei nitna lebas kohen shenzinsa. Umay chumra kida amram. Because that's given, Sreifa is given to a bas kohen. Adarab sayev chomar, because it's given to a shenit and anshir adaka, so my chumash came a moina of it. So sayev should be equal to Sreifa, because sayev is given to an ir dachas, which is also a pretty bad avera. So the Gemara says, Amrit, I'll tell you not so. Who's worse, the insider or the insided? Have it oimer, we go to Amid Beis, have it oimer koyach mediach, the insider. And now the madiach, according to Rab Shimon, the insider of Ir and Yidachas is going to get Sureif, is going to get Chenek. So is going to get Chenek. The Kal v'choimer, and we're going to say like this: Ma Chenek shechomer Mesayev. The Chenek, the choking, is more severe than Sayev. Sreifa chamura mimena. Sreifa is more severe than Chenek. Sayev hakal lekoshkein. If Sreifa is more severe than Chenek, and Chenek is more severe than Sayev, because we see that Chenek is given to the Madiach, where the Sayev is given to the Nidach, so it must be that Sreifa is more severe than Sayev. Then that's for sure. Skila, now again, we go to the next level. So, and we establish the most severest of all the punishments, according to Rab Shimon, is Sreifa. The next one is Skila. Skila chamura mechenek. How do you know Skila is more severe than Chenek? Skila is the next one. Number 2, according to Rab Shimon. Skila chamura mechenek, shekei nitl megadef v'loiv v'zar. Skila is given to if you curse God or you do avodah zarah. My chumra kedamra. Chenek is given to a big avera of hitting your father and mother. So maybe Chenek is severer than Skila, or equal. Answers the Gemara. Since a Nesua Bas Yisrael gets Chenek, and a Rusa Bas Yisrael gets Skila, Shma Mina Skila Chamur. So it must be that Skila is more severe than Chenek. So now we have established that Skila is more severe than Chenek. How do you know Skila is more severe than the knife? So the Gemara says, Skila chamur mechenek shekei nitl megadev. Adarabba. So Skila is given to the curse, to the one that does avodah zarah. Adarabba sayev chomer shekei nitl anshi ir hanidachas by chumash came a moina oven. Isn't sayev given to a bad avera of ir hanidachas? So the Gemara said, Amret v'chi eza koyach meruba koyach mediach koyach nidach. Eza have a koyach mediach. And the insider of the ir hanidachas, what does he get? Chenek. But we already established that Skila is more severe than Chenek. So it must be more severe than Sayev. Chenek is more severe than Sayev because it's given to the Badiach. Skila, Chamura Meri and Skila, we already established is more severe than Chenek. So Sayev, Akal Lekoshke. So certainly Skila is more severe than Sayev. Now the last thing. And how do we know Chenek Chomer Mesayev? How do you know the Chenek is Chomer Mesayev? We keep saying that. Chenek is more severe than Sayev. Shekein niten lemaka ovev v'imay. Umay chomer kedamrim. Because Chenek is given for a bad avera of maka ovev v'imay. So adarabba, Sayev chomer, because that's given to it. Shekein niten l'anshi yiradach. So my chomer shekein amoinim ovad. Ava, chiyeza koyach meruba koyach mediach koyach nidach. Haveh koyach mediach. V'tani mediach yiradachas b'skila. So Rab Shimon Oimer Bechenek. Rab Shimon says that the madiach of a ir nidachas, the guy who incites the ir nidachas, gets chenek, and the chenek must be more than the Ir Nidachas himself. The people in the city get Sayef. The guy that's on the speakerphone gets Chenek because he incited the whole city to do Avodah Zarah. So it must be that Chenek is more severe than Sayef. Another 2 minutes and then we'll stop. Again, Magalo Bapume de Rabbi Yochanan. Now Marasa Basi Koyin. Again, let's just do a review. A regular woman that does nus gets chenek. A arusa bas Yisrael that does nus gets chenek, gets skila. A nesua bas koyin doing nus, a married woman, a bas koyin, she gets reifa. What about a manara hamurasa bas koyin? That's the machlekes between Reb Shimon and the Tanakama. Reb Shimon is going to hold that a nara marasa is going to get worse than a skila, is going to get nara marasa bas koyin is going to get sreifa, because Reb Shimon holds sreifa is the worst. That's what Margala B'Puna Rabbi Yochanan. This is exactly what Rabbi Yochanan kept repeating. Nara marasa bas koyin shenzin saw a bas koyin that does, who's a nara marasa that does nus gets skila. Reb Shimon says gets sreifa. Now, Rab Shimon, Rab Zinsa Me'avir. Let's say you have a bas koyin nara marasa, a little girl engaged bas koyin. She does nus with her own father, so she gets skila. According to, she did two averis. One, she's a nara marasa, and she's doing znus with her father. And with doing znus with her father, she should only get chenek. But she's a nara marasa, she's going to get skila. Shimon Oimer sreifa, she gets sreifa. So my kamash malan, what is Rabbi Yochanan teaching you? The sooner yatzel l'sreifa v'layarusa, Rab Shimon. According to the Tanakh, Rabbanan Nesua Yatzel Sefer Layarusa, a bas koyin who's Nesua gets Reifa, but not an Arusa. Rab Shimon Achas Rucha v'Achas Nesua. Whether you're an Arusa bas koyin, a Nesua bas koyin Yatzel Sreifa. But Tamamai Mishum the Rabbanim Skila Chamura, and Rab Shimon Sreifa Chamura. And let's just finish off over here. Nafkamina, and we'll stop 2 more lines. Nafkamina. What's the nafkamina of this entire sugya? What do I need to know? What's more severe? The Mishnah is chayiv shtei misas. If you violated two commandments, bezdin, and you're supposed to get the death penalty, nidan bechamura. You're going to get the more severe one. So if you violate, let's say, doing znus with a married woman, or Shabbos, you're going to get which doing znus with a married woman's chenek and violating Shabbos is skila. They're going to give you skila. But let's just throw out one example and then we'll end. Let's say someone violated with a bas koyin. He with a bas koyin, he did znus with a bas koyin. The bas koyin did znus. She gets sreifa, and she also was violating Shabbos. So she's now up against 2 capital punishments, sreifa and skila. According to Rab Shimon, we're going to give her the sreifa. According to Rabbanan, we're going to give her the skila. Okay, that's today's daf.
Thank you.
Okay. A good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Okay. Let's just finish to the Tana Rabbanan. My Rab Shimon, where did Rab Shimon say his main thesis, which is that an Arusa Bas Koyen will get Sreifa, not Skila. Tanya, we learned in the Brayso, Rab Shimon Aimer Shnei Klolos Nemer Bas Koyen. There's 2 types of Znus said by a Bas Koyen. So the Gemara says Bas Koyin, v'loy Bas Yisrael. Is it said the pasuk only talks about a Bas Koyin that does nus, a Bas Yisrael that does nus? The Torah doesn't talk about. Af Bas Koyin. The Torah talks also about a Bas Koyin, and the Torah tell you like this: V'ayitzi akasav nesua meklal nesua, v'arusa meklal arusa. The Torah told you that a nesua Bas Koyin is different than a nesua Bas Yisrael. Nesua Bas Koyin gets sreifa, and nesua Bas Yisrael gets chenek. Varusa meklal arusa, and arusa bas Yisrael gets skila, right? So an arusa bas koyin will be different than arusa bas Yisrael, which will get sreifa as well. You get the worst. You get a worse punishment, as opposed to chenek. You're going to get get an Nesua Bas Kohen is going to get Sreifa. When the Torah told you that an Arusa Bas Yisrael gets Skila, and the Torah wants to make it more severe on a Bas Kohen, she's going to also get something more severe, which is Sreifa Lahachmir. Now the Gemara just finishes off Zoymimei Nesua Bas Kohen Bechlal Zoymimei Nesua Bas Yisrael. Let's say the false set up witnesses, the Zoymimim witnesses of a Bas Kohen, of a Nesua Bas Kohen, should they wanted to be Mechayev her a Sreifa. They said this Bas Kohen, this married Bas Kohen did Znus, we're not going to give the Zoymimim Sreifa. They're going to give them Chenek. They're going to get Chenek because the Torah only said this Sreifa will only apply to a Bas Kohen that does Nus. But it's limited to the witnesses that are Zoymimim. They're only going to get Chenek, like as if they were trying to set up a Nesua Bas Yisrael. Because this is just, Sreifa is reserved just for the Bas Kohen herself, but not for her Zoymimim. Although normally Zoymimim take on the punishment of the one that they wanted to punish, but here the Zoymimim are going to get something less, which is Chenek. And Zoymer Arusa Bas Kohen, which want to give her also Sreifa, Zoymimei Arusa Bas Yisrael. It's as if they were trying to set up a Bas Yisrael, an Arusa. And Arusa Bas Yisrael gets Skila. Although, according to Rav Shimon, Arusa Bas Kohen will get Sreifa, the Zoymimim of Arusa Bas Kohen will get Skila, because only a Bas Kohen gets this reserved punishment of Sreifa, and not a Bas Yisrael. And not the Zoymimim. Okay, we will finish here.